And we have this amazing, exciting, I promise that when we leave here today, two things are going to happen. We're going to be absolutely educated on the truth of what happened in Tallahassee, on what is potentially going to happen. I don't know the presentation, but normally they give us some information of what's going to happen. And then the second session, we're going to come together and we're going to figure out how do we take this information, how do we as a collective, united community, from Escambia all the way, I think, to Bay and down to Dade if we need to, come together and save ourselves, our children's, and our community. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Derek so he can give you the speech, and I'm going to go get ready for the rest of the stuff. But Equal Ground, we thank you. Greater Peace, we thank you. Sabu, I know we brought you back. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to say it again. Good morning, freedom fighters. Good morning. I'm not Jill, so you know I write my stuff down. So bear with me as I'm not as extemporaneous as she is. On behalf of the Northwest Florida Panhandle Coalition for Civic Engagement, it is our honor to welcome you to the Equal Ground 2025 Legislative Session Debrief. We gather today not just to reflect, but to recharge, recommit, and rise. This year's legislative session brought both challenges and clarifying moments. From Tallahassee to Pensacola, we witnessed policies that tested our resolve and movements that reminded us of our power. And through it all, Equal Ground stood firm, educating, organizing, mobilizing communities across Florida with unwavering purpose. As a coalition rooted in the Panhandle, we know that civic engagement is not seasonal, it is generational. It lives in our churches, our community centers, our classrooms, and conversations. Today, we join with partners from across the Panhandle to ensure that Northwest Florida's voice is not only heard, but heeded. Let this debrief be more than a recap. Let it be a call to action. Let it be a space where strategy meets spirit and where our shared commitment to justice becomes the blueprint for what comes next. On behalf of the Panhandle Coalition, we want to say thank you to Equal Ground, thank you to the rest of our partners, and welcome and enjoy today's program.
Thank you so very much. So it is my pleasure to introduce a dynamic and deeply respected leader, Genesis Robinson. He's the executive director of Equal Ground, Florida's premier Black-led voting rights organization. He's a proud graduate of Florida A&M University. Strike, strike, and strike again. Genesis began his career on Capitol Hill, serving in the U.S. House of Representatives during the 113th and 114th Congress. With over a decade of experience in political strategy and grassroots organizing, he's not only known for his sharp political instincts, but also for his calm, thoughtful leadership and genuine commitment to the community. So please join me in welcoming my boss, Genesis Robinson, the executive director of Equal Ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. All right. Thank you so much, Jackie, and good morning to each and every one of you. Come on now, y'all can do better than that. Good morning to each and every one of you. All right, excellent. It is certainly a delight. Thank you, Jackie, to be here in Okaloosa County for our legislative debrief tour. At the end of every legislative session, Equal Ground makes the commitment to travel the state of Florida. And when I say the state of Florida, I mean the entire state of Florida, talking about the impact and the results of Florida's legislative session. And so this year, this stop is a little unique because I know that some of you may be here in connection to the Trump takeover event. And so after we had already had this event scheduled, we had gotten reached out to by the organizers of that event to ask that we spend time during this presentation also dedicated to the issues that we see with the federal government and this attack to partisan gerrymander seats to control Congress. And so we certainly we'll deal with that. But again, I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank our partners. I know it's been stated, you've heard from each of them, but truly, without their partnership, without their engagement, none of this would be possible. And I just want to give our partners a round of applause. So I'm going to walk through a slideshow presentation. I have a clicker here. The signal is giving us a bit of an issue. As you all see, we've had some tech challenges this morning. But again, I'm going to thank you to push forward. So Derek, if you could proceed to the next slide, please. All right. You can go ahead and proceed again. All right, so about Equal Ground. So for those of you who may not be familiar, Equal Ground is a Black-led voting rights organization. We've been in existence now for 6 years. We work throughout the entire state of Florida to ensure that Black communities have an opportunity to participate in the civic engagement process. This is something that we take incredibly serious. We do voter education and preparedness. We also engage in advocacy, as that's often what you'll be hearing about tonight. We also engage in leadership training and leadership development because we know that we need to train the next generation of leaders to come and take on the mantle and continue this fight. And so that's also important to us as well. Next slide, please. All right, here are some members of our team. We're small, but we're mighty. You all heard from Jackie today. Jackie's our Northwest Florida field manager. So for our phone banks and outreach efforts, Jackie is sort of the point person that you would engage with. Our founder is Jacqueline Bernie Clark, the young lady right underneath me. She's the founder of the organization, had the vision to start this organization. And then Simon Adams, he's the newest member of our team. And then Pastor Marcus McCoy, who's our faith outreach director. Next slide, please. So I know we're here to talk about Florida's legislative session, but one of the things that we absolutely must pause to have a conversation about is what is happening with our democracy. You all know, obviously, by now, that there are very real attempts to not only pass voter suppression laws, but to literally rig our election process through the process of redistricting. You may remember in 2022, after the 2020 census, Florida initiated their redistricting process. And it was at that time that our governor, Ron DeSantis, told the legislature that he wanted to pass congressional maps that diminished the voting power of Black voters, that created a partisan advantage for Republicans. And he forced that map upon the legislature. They ultimately approved that map. We sued the state of Florida over that map because we knew that it was unconstitutional. It went all the way to the Florida Supreme Court, and just about 2 weeks ago, the Florida Supreme Court, much of which is stacked by appointees of Governor Ron DeSantis, delivered him a victory in a 5-1 ruling upholding those constitutional maps. And the reason that this is so important is because, number one, Florida has what's called fair district amendments, right? So in 2010, the voters of this state passed amendments to our Constitution to tell the legislators how we wish for the redistricting process to go. We said we don't want you to draw districts with regard to partisanship. We don't want you to draw districts with respect to incumbency. And yet, despite this safeguard being on the books, this safeguard being approved by voters, we still see attacks to partisan gerrymandering. And the consequences of that are quite dire. For Black voters, in North Florida in particular, you no longer have representation in Congress. And we know Florida has a long, complex history with the issue of representation. It was post-Reconstruction that Florida elected its first Black congressman. And then we went 118 years. It wasn't until 1992. So imagine from the late 1800s to 1992, a state like Florida not having not a single Black person in Congress. And so because of the redistricting effort, we were then able to elect 3 Black congresspersons to go to Florida, go to the U.S. Congress, Congressman Alcee Hastings, Congresswoman Corrine Brown, and Congresswoman Carrie Meek. And they all went to Congress. And that was because we stood up and we demanded fair representation in Congress. And so here we are, just under 30 years removed from that very monumental moment. And now we see politicians trying to take us back in time. So not only do we see the elimination of seats that can ensure representation in Congress, but we also have seen a shift in the partisan makeup of our congressional delegation. And I want to take a moment to really drive home why that's so important. Well, every year after the census, states determine, it's a process called reapportionment that determines whether or not states will gain a congressional representative based on their growth, or if they will lose a congressional representative based on regress in their area. Well, Florida, we gained a seat. Our population had grew. Some thought that we could gain as many as 2 congressional seats, but we ultimately ended up with 1. And so prior to this redistricting effort, Florida had 27 seats in Congress. 14 of those seats were represented by Republicans. 13 of those seats were represented by Democrats. But when the governor got done forcing his map, that number shifted, and now Republicans hold 20 seats to Democrats 8 seats. Now, this is a nonpartisan conversation, and we're not here to, pick sides, all right? But obviously, we know that because of the Fair District Amendments, that should not have been allowed to happen, to create such an unfair partisan advantage and eliminate parity. And so the stakes of that are very high, right? We talk about what we saw happen at the federal level with the budget reconciliation bill that they refer to as the big beautiful bill. I refer to it as the big ugly bill. But we see this legislation pass the House of Representatives by just 4 votes. So when you think about the fact that our governor, Ron DeSantis, was able to give Republicans at the congressional level this advantage, that has enabled those type of pieces of bills to pass through Congress. That has enabled the implementation of a Trump agenda. That has enabled the implementation of Project 2025, all because a state, the state of Florida, rigged their maps to give Republicans an advantage. And so this is serious business. This is something that we have to pay attention to and be mindful of. And the part that really frustrates me the most about this, next slide please, is in the dissent, there was only one justice who disagreed with the dismantling of our democracy, and that was Justice Labarga. And in his dissent, he said, the enacted plan violates the non-diminishment clause of the Florida Constitution because it not just diminished, but it eliminated CD5, a historically performing benchmark district for Black voters. So essentially what he's saying here is the state is departing from ensuring that there was a district that was guaranteed to represent the interests of Black voters in North Florida. When I talk about the 1992 election in which Florida created 3 seats that were guaranteed to elect a Black candidate, one was in Jacksonville, Florida. That's CD5 that he's referring to. And so if you could go back 1 slide for me. You can use the arrow also, just to let you know. Okay, so right here, so if you look at the top map, that is the district prior to the governor enacting his plan. That district, while it looks long and drawn out, that district was drawn that way to ensure that minority voters in the North Florida region would have an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. And that was created in 1992. And so that was 3 districts, like I said, that were guaranteed to elect a minority candidate, at least a Black candidate, and that was up in North Florida and then 2 in South Florida. And so now, if you look at the map underneath, that is the district that is now enacted because of the governor's plan. Next slide, please. And then the next quote I just want to lift up from Justice Labarga was, it says, although the majority agrees that the enacted plan diminishes the ability of Black voters to elect representatives of their choice, it ultimately concludes that no relief is warranted, therefore I dissent. And this was chilling Because this is a Florida Supreme Court justice acknowledging, yes, we have done wrong by voters. Yes, we have, violated the Fair District Amendments that were approved in 2010, and yet we are not going to do anything to remedy this problem. And so now we have a 2022 election under what we believe are unconstitutional maps, a 2024 election under what was unconstitutional maps, and it looks like we're headed to a 2026 election under unconstitutional maps. Next slide, please. But the problem is, despite everything that I just said about how bad this is, we have more problems on the horizon. You may have heard about conversations where Donald Trump has instructed states like Texas and states like Florida to give him more congressional seats. If you followed the 2020 election, it sort of reminds you of when he called up to Georgia to say, I need 11,000 votes, right? He thinks our democracy operates on what he wants and his desires and his wishes. But the reality of it is that's not true. And so this is a brazen power grab in broad daylight. And we all need to be loud about it. We need to be clear about what this is. This is not about additional representation. This is not about giving you an opportunity to elect better candidates. This is about power. They know that their policies are not popular. They know that in 2026, there's an opportunity for voters to elect a new Congress, and they want to get ahead of it by consolidating power and creating more of an advantage. And so that's something that we all need to, use our voices to make sure that we're speaking out against. This is a dangerous effort. The redistricting process is normally every 10 years. And so there's no reason whatsoever for us to be talking about redrawing our boundaries here in this state. We don't have new data from the census, right? Like normally when you get the data from the census, you use that data to inform your redistricting process. So absent of new data, it is clear that this is only for political purposes, and we need to all make sure that we're using our voices to speak out against it. Next slide, please. And so, like I said, we were a plaintiff in the redistricting fight here in the state of Florida. We wanted to make sure that we're using this day to be a part of a national movement where there are events and rallies and community conversations all over the country right now, today, talking about this issue, people standing in solidarity, talking about how we're going to fight back and meet this moment, because we have to do more to safeguard our democracy. This is really the threat of our lifetime. If this man is able to consolidate power in such a way that allows you not to hold the current representatives accountable for the policies that they've passed, and for him to keep power throughout the remainder of his presidency. Much is on the line. Just think about everything that you're seeing right now, right? We have a chance to change it in 2026, but if they rig the map, if they rig the electoral system by gerrymandering these seats, it will make it that much harder. So we got to make sure that we're using our voice to uplift that. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit more about legislative session. I know that's what we're here to talk about and get a recap of legislative session. So next slide, please. What is legislative session? Legislative session is a 60-day period of time here in Florida where our legislators go to Tallahassee to conduct the affairs of our state. It's supposed to be 60 days. Well, if you followed the process here in Florida, you know that we went 45 days into overtime, and our session ended up being 105 days. And so that is a great, it's almost a double session, essentially. But the Constitution only requires our legislators to be in Tallahassee for session only 60 days out of the year. So we're a part-time legislature. During this process, we see the creation of new laws, we see the repeal of old laws, we see the implementation of a state budget, which is much of why they ultimately ended up fighting and extending session, because there was a disagreement over the budget, and I'll make sure that I get into that a little later. The legislature is sort of elected by every 2 years here in Florida. All of the House is up for election, and then a portion of the Senate is up for election. Next slide. So here are some of the key players in this process. Obviously, without us, without taxpayers, without you living and existing and working in this state, there would be no need for state government. So we play a very important role in that. And because of that, it's important that we engage in that process, because the things that happen in Tallahassee are supposed to serve us, right? It's supposed to serve our interests. And so you have us, you have constituents and taxpayers, you have advocacy groups like your Equal Grounds, your NAACPs, your Legal Women Voters. You have lobbyists who represent the interest of a particular client, oftentimes special interests. You have staff. Every member of the legislature has dedicated staff persons working for them to help meet the moment and address the issues that you all have. Then you have the legislature itself. Florida has what's known as a Republican supermajority legislature. We'll talk on what that means in a second. And then you have our governor, who is Ron DeSantis, who's in his final year as governor, as we'll be electing a governor. Well, he's in his last leg, I should say, of his governorship. We'll be electing a new governor in 2026, next year. All right, next slide, please. So what are some of the ways that we engage? First and foremost, we're present in Tallahassee. Every day of legislative session, we make the commitment to be in Tallahassee. This is a big financial undertaking, but it's important, because when you're engaging lawmakers, they need to know you, they need to have a relationship with you, and they need to be able to see that you care about these issues. We could do it, virtually. We could do it from our headquarters in Orlando, but being in Tallahassee, looking them in their face, going to committees, is something that we take very seriously, and we make that commitment. This is the third year in a row we've made that commitment to be there every day. We offer a weekly newsletter. Some of you I know are subscribed to that newsletter. If you're not, there is a handout in your folders that'll give you a chance to join our mailing list. And during session, we send out an email blast every week updating you all on what is happening in Tallahassee. We provide opportunities for you to take action. Right now, speaking of taking action, we are asking, if you scan the QR code, there's an opportunity for you to sign a petition and send a letter to your state legislators asking them to stand down with respect to this redistricting fight. We want to send a loud and clear message to our legislators that we will not stand for them manipulating our maps. And so we encourage you to scan the QR code, to take the action for that. Our Day at the Capitol, this is our signature event during session, where folks come from all over the state. They come to Tallahassee to advocate, to talk to legislators, to meet them and hear about the issues. And then coalition building is important, because we know that we can't do this work alone. And so it's always great. We're always grateful when we're able to expand and bring on new partners to expand our footprint in this work. Next slide, please. One more, please. One more, please. So we'll be in Tallahassee for our Day at the Capitol, June 3rd through 4th of 2026. So if that's something that you're interested in, we would certainly love to have you. We have buses that come from various parts of the state. I know Panhandle has always held it down, representing and having a bus come over. And so if that's something that you're interested in, I can assure you that this will probably be the best time to go and participate in Tallahassee. We provide food, we have a rally, we set up a whole agenda for you to go and meet with legislators, and we bring certain legislators to you to talk and engage. So it's just a really dynamic time of power building and learning and connecting with other like-minded folks throughout the state. Next session. Next slide. All right, so I talked about Florida having a supermajority legislature. So I want to lean in a little bit more on what that means. And so when we talk about power, when you have a supermajority legislature, that means you control at least 2/3 of the seats in that body. And if you know anything about legislative procedure, you know that having a 2/3 control enables you to really act on your agenda and not have to even listen to the minority party, because you literally hold all the power. And so, for example, what you see happening in Texas, where Democratic lawmakers have fled the state to prevent the legislature, or at least the House, from having quorum to conduct business, that does not happen in Florida, because Republicans have such a control of the House and the Senate that even if all the Democrats left, they would still have enough votes to make quorum, and they can completely control the legislative proceedings. And so out of the 120 seats in the Florida House of Representatives, 87 of them are held by Republican members, 32 of them are held by Democrats, and there's one vacancy. And so next slide, please. And so the reason that I wanted to sort of lift this up is to sort of level set and show you who's responsible and who's in control for some of the policies that you'll hear us talk about today. In the Senate, the story is the same. We have 40 members of the Florida Senate. 27 of those seats are held by Republicans. 10 of those seats are held by Democrats. There's one no party affiliated member, and then there's two vacancies, one of which will be filled in just under a month. Next slide, please. So here are some members of the Okaloosa County delegation. We just wanted to make sure that you can see and identify the people who represent you here in this community. Regardless of your political affiliation, these people are still elected to represent you, right? And so I know it may be challenging. I know they don't like to meet with people who are not of their political ideology. You know, they'll deny your meeting requests. They won't come to your events. Despite us criticizing a lot of the things that they've done, we invited all of these legislators to be here with us today. And as you can see, none of them accepted that invitation. But I do want you to know that we did extend an opportunity for them to come and tell you and talk to you about why they voted and did the things that they did during session. Next slide. Here's the Escambia County delegation. As you know, there's some overlap just because in less dense communities, sometimes a senator or a representative may represent multiple counties. So here are your members from Escambia County. Next slide, please. Here in Walton County, the leadership there, or the representatives there. Next slide. And then Santa Rosa County as well. On your handout, there is a directory. We think it's important to connect people with an opportunity to engage with their lawmakers. And so you have the addresses, the phone numbers, and the email, I believe, to each of those offices. And so we highly encourage you to reach out to them, engage with them, and talk about the issues that matter. Next slide. So also like to shout out, we're in partnership. Yes, sir.
Did they respond at all to the invitations?
That's a great question. So I think we heard from one office who indicated that they were not able to attend, but the others we did not hear from. And quite frankly, that is par for the course when it comes to outreach, unfortunately. We see that often. Yes. You don't believe that before? Yes. Which county are you with? Okaloosa. Okay. We'll make sure we get you one. Okay. What county? Okaloosa. Can you bring just a few of them? Okay. All right. Yes. We'll get you Washington. Okay. We'll get you a folder. So wanted to just give a shout out real quick to our partners at Progress Florida and Florida Watch. Every year they create a report card to sort of rank and talk about where the legislators stood on the issues as it relates to standing up for the people. And so they put out this report card. If you visit floridareportcard.com, again, floridareportcard.com, you can see an assessment on where legislators stood on the issues that matter to our community, and you can see their grades. And so we just wanted to give a shout out to all of the lawmakers who got an A grade, meaning they stood up in favor of the people. I do have a suspicion that if you go and take a look and find your legislators, you'd be quite surprised at the grade that they got. Next slide, please. And then here are just some of the bills that were passed by members of the Northwest Florida delegation. For the sake of time, I won't go in on all of these bills because I know that you're going to get this presentation, and I really want to make sure that we have time for questions. But here are some of the bills that are in the presentation that you will receive that talk about the bills that they passed. Excuse me. Next slide, please. All right, so this year there were 1,989, a little shy of 2,000 bills that were introduced in the Florida legislature. Of those almost 2,000 bills, 269 made it to the governor's desk for the governor to take action on. Next slide. And out of those 269 bills, the governor has signed about 91% of those bills. You know, here in Florida, July 1st is a date that a lot of our bills go into effect. So most of these bills have already gone into effect. We had almost 200 new bills go into effect on July 1 here in Florida. So I encourage you to go do some research on what those bills are. I know I was certainly mindful when I was driving up from Daytona Beach because I see my brother laughing there. There's a new law concerning speeding. Now, I'm not a speeder necessarily, but if you now go over 50 miles per hour beyond the speed limit, or you're driving over 100 miles per hour and they can consider that recklessly, you will automatically go to jail in this state. And so, you know, in fact, right after that law had gone into effect, I live in Volusia County, and probably about 10 days after the law had gone into effect, they arrested a young man and they released the body camera, and he's saying, "I didn't know this was a law. I didn't know. I'm just going 101." And I said, "Only?" You know, but the body camera was revealing, right? And so that's just to show you, you know, there are laws that impact your life, right? But if you don't take the time to research and kind of figure out what those laws are, you'll be like that young man saying, "I didn't know." And we all know that ignorance is not a defense, right? So next slide, please. So this year, before I walk through some of the bills, we're gonna like kind of go bill by bill now, but before I do that, I just want to kind of level set and talk about how we view this session. This was a very, very unique legislative session. If you've followed Florida politics for a while, you know that this governor, since coming on the scene in 2018, has really been able to get any and everything that he wanted out of this legislature. Because he has a supermajority, if he says it, he gets it. If he wanted it, he got it. But this year was different. There was a lot of infighting amongst the Republican conference. I mentioned earlier that we went 105 days instead of 60 over a budget disagreement. And so, you know, this was a very, very unique session. And we think that that has a lot to do with the reality that, you know, the governor's on his way out. You know, when you're a lame duck, you sort of lose power. But not only that, when you no longer have the power over people, they kind of sense that. And the reason I say that is because ever since he was elected in 2018, if you were paying attention, you knew that Ron DeSantis had aspirations to be president of the United States. Well, we know there was an election last year, and probably much to the chagrin of all of us, it didn't go, especially to him, he wasn't the person who was elected president, right? And so with that came a reality check that the power that you may have one day, you won't have. And so the power that you have over me as a legislator, you no longer have, right? Because just think about it. I mean, if your governor is potentially going to be the president of the United States, you don't want to upset your governor. You're going to do everything that your governor tells you to do. And so that reality, I think, played a major role in what we saw from session, because a lot of the priorities that the governor asked the legislature to deliver on, they didn't do. And this is despite them holding all the control, right? So we have a supermajority Republican Senate, supermajority Republican House, and then the governor's office is controlled by Republicans. So if you're talking about passing policies, they have no excuse for why they shouldn't be able to get their policies done. We also saw the emergence of the Hope Florida scandal. We'll talk about that in a second. And I think that also torpedoed a lot of his legislative priorities. And so it was just a very unique session. You know, I don't want to give the Republican conference credit for sort of, you know, going against the governor, if you will, but we certainly saw a lot of dissent, which created opportunities here in the state. All right, next slide, please. One more, please. So now I want to walk through some of the bills, and forgive us, the formatting of the system that we had to use here kind of distorted a few of the slides. So forgive us, I promise you we didn't look at that and say that was okay. All right, so first thing I want to talk about is the state budget. This year, Florida passed a $115 billion budget. The budget that ultimately ended up getting signed into law was $117.4 billion. This was because of an administrative thing where the governor pulled over money that had been left over from previous budget and tacked it onto the money that was approved by the legislature. But the money approved by the legislature was $115 billion. After the legislature approved the budget, they sent it to the governor, and he vetoed almost $600 million of funding from the budget. We'll talk a little bit about that for what it means for Northwest Florida in a second. But here in Florida, our governor has line item veto power. Line item veto power gives you the ability to go into the budget and take out one project without vetoing the entire budget. And so he did that all throughout the state and took out about $600 million in projects and appropriations that had been approved by a bipartisan legislature, but because he has the power to do it, he took away a lot of that funding. We see the department that received the most funding was Health and Human Services here in the state, received about $17.5 billion. There was a little over $6 billion for the Florida State University and the state college system to fund our public universities and colleges. We also see over $15 billion going to the Department of Transportation. We saw a very minuscule investment in affordable housing. I mean, it's almost laughable that they even decided to put that money there, but we see only $164 million going into the SHIP program, which helps local communities afford affordable housing. And we know that's a drop in the bucket, right? When you look at the issue of housing and affordability in this state, we need way more of an investment than millions. It needs to be a billion, multi-billion dollar effort. And so counties like Miami-Dade can swallow that entire line item up just on their needs alone. And so we need to encourage our lawmakers to do more on issues like affordable housing, because we know that budgets reflect priorities, right? What you fund is what you prioritize. What you fund is what you care. And so you can't tell me that you believe in affordable housing. You can't tell me that you believe in education and you don't reflect it in your budget. And so we're calling on our lawmakers to do more with our budget. Next slide. So I talked about sort of the disagreement over, next slide please. I talked about the disagreement over the budget and us going 45 days into overtime. And that was mainly because they had a major disagreement over how they wanted to reduce taxes. So you had one faction that said we want to eliminate property taxes. And then you had another faction that says we want to reduce the sales tax here in the state. Now, while I know that may sound appealing because Florida has the most regressive tax system in the country, and you can certainly use a little tax relief, I want to caution people when they hear this notion of eliminating property taxes, right? As a homeowner, myself, I know I could certainly appreciate, not having to pay $4,000 in property taxes I pay every year. But what I also know is that these funds, one, provide for public education in our state. We pay for public education in large part from property taxes. And so while people may think that sounds like a good idea, what will happen is you will erode the very institution that is meant to serve our entire community, and that's public education. And we know there's an attempt by certain politicians to erode public education. They want to expand vouchers, they want to increase private opportunities, charter schools. And so this is a clandestine way, a way for them to do that by selling to you as a voter, like, hey, don't you want some relief? Don't you want to save a few extra dollars every year? But it will come at a great expense. Not only does these funds provide for public education, but it gives our local governments the resources that they need to do things like pay for certain essential services. And so we want to be very leery of any attempt to roll back and eliminate property taxes. And so ultimately, neither side got their way. The budget went forth without the elimination of property taxes, nor the elimination or the reduction of the sales tax. We did see the state of Florida expand its tax holidays. You may have, over the years, used the back-to-school sales tax holidays. If there are any parents in the room and preparing for back to school for your young ones, there would typically be a week where you could go and buy school supplies and school clothes and not have to pay taxes. Well, that has now been expanded. So the back to school tax holiday is now the entire month of August. And that would be every year you have the entire month of August to make purchases. And so if there's something that you need, like paper, pens, clerical supplies, anything like that, clothing, you can now still go and purchase that in the entire month of August. We also expanded the natural disaster holiday. So in Florida, we're very susceptible to hurricanes. We now have a tax holiday where you can go and get all of your supplies to prepare for hurricane season and not have to pay taxes. So that was good to have that extended. And then we saw the elimination of the business rent tax. This is something that a lot of business owners have long fought for. They pay, I believe it was a 2% tax on commercial leases for their rent. And so the state of Florida has now eliminated that, which will be about $900 million less that we bring in to the state. So whenever there's a tax cut, right, that means less money oftentimes. And they offset that by either cutting programs or, raising taxes for someone else. And so we don't know how the state plans to make up for that $900 million right now. But that's something to be on the lookout for in future sessions when they start talking about not having money and needing to make cuts. But they've, now given a tax break. And then it wouldn't be Florida if we didn't have a Second Amendment tax holiday. And so now in the state of Florida, there's a special holiday for you to go and purchase guns and ammunition and not have to pay taxes on those. And while I'm on that note, I also said there was a new tax holiday. When I was reading through the budget, I was like, what? This is crazy. We now have a tax abatement if you're a NASCAR fan. And so you don't have to pay taxes when you buy your NASCAR tickets. And as we all know, that was catered to a very specific community, right? So yes, so that's what your lawmakers did while in Tallahassee with your time. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so that's a great question. Her question was, do I have an estimate on how much that actually saves people? It varies, based on which tax savings you're using. So the back to school sales tax, it's 6.5%. It just depends on whatever you're buying. You're saving 6.5% on that. But for the NASCAR piece, that is totally 100% a messaging ploy to a certain demographic of people who likely are more likely voters of the people that passed that. So I'm not sure what that, and I'm not even sure. And I live in Daytona, the home of NASCAR, and I should know. Next slide, please. Well, actually, before you go to the next slide, I just want to drive home that point, right? Because that's a great point. And I want to, they justified going 45 days into overtime because they said they wanted to provide you relief, right? But what ended up happening is we didn't really get real relief. Yes, we got the extension of the back to school sales tax holiday. Yes, we got the disaster preparedness holiday. But corporations and businesses walked away with more benefit from this session than regular taxpayers. And so I talked about the NASCAR piece, but that benefits NASCAR because if people can now save 6.5% tax, they're likely more inclined to buy tickets. So that helps that business and that industry. But in addition to that, we also saw casinos get a new tax abatement here in the state of Florida, and we also saw airlines now don't have to pay the fuel tax in the state of Florida. And I was telling my wife, as I've been booking a lot of flights, I said, well, I haven't seen that reflected in my budget and on these ticket prices, and so, just another thing here. All right, next slide. Okay, so very briefly, here's the next two slides are graphics that show what appropriations went to the various counties. I know it might be hard to see, but I wanted to kind of point out that Escambia County had $282 million appropriated in the budget that is coming back to the county. And Okaloosa County, there was $573,956 in the budget. In Santa Rosa, There was $30,963,000 in appropriations coming to the community. And then in Walton, there was $19,934,000 coming back to the community through appropriations. Now, again, appropriations are sort of like a specialty project. That doesn't mean that that's all of the funding your community will get, but in terms of like requests that lawmakers make, let's say for a road, for a bridge, or for a community center, right? That is the funding that will be coming back to the various communities. Next slide. And so when we talk about what was included in the budget, go back. Okay, yep, one more. All right. So when we talk about what was included in the budget, we see various allocations that were able to survive the governor's veto pen. Typically, we don't see the governor touch early childhood care. And so you all have about $11 million, over $11 million coming to the region for school readiness and early learning services. So VPK, the expansion of VPK to allow parents to send their children to school earlier. The Northwest Florida State College received $5 million for their Workforce Innovation Center. Blue Angels Foundation, I don't know if anyone knows who that is, but they received $1.5 million for the work that they do. The J Business Park Stormwater Pond was a $450,000 appropriation. And then the Pensacola Perdido Bays Usury Program also received $975,000. Next slide, please. So when we talk about some of the vetoes, these were things that were in the budget, right? I want to be very clear about that. They were able to be included in the final budget that the legislators voted on. And then when it got to the governor's desk, he decided to take it out. And so you see projects such as the Education Research Center for Child Development at UWF, I'm thinking that's University of West Florida. That was $1.667 million that was taken out. Havens of Hope Foundation, there was a senior care program. They had $375,000 of their funding cut for programs. The Florida Lighthouse at Risk Youth Mentorship Program, the Omega Lamplighters, they had gotten $250,000 and the governor took that out of the budget. The Pouring Foundation's Housing Transitional Project to help people who are looking to transition to more stable housing opportunities, they had $50,000 cut from their budget request. So as you can see, here are just some of the projects that were included. We're going to send this out to everyone, so you'll have this. And then this is not an exhaustive list, right? There were over, I think, almost $30 million in things that were cut from the region between the various times. Next slide, please. All right, so I want to talk briefly about a bill that passed this legislative session that we were opposed to, and that was House Bill 1205, and it had to do with the citizen-led initiative process here in Florida. So just by a quick show of hands, how many people have ever signed a petition for anything? It doesn't matter what the issue is. Okay, great. So this bill, yes, I see all your hands sign some petitions, all right? So this bill will have an impact on that process, right, of you signing petitions. So as you know, here in Florida, we have a process called the citizen-led initiative process, which enables us to get things on the ballot so all voters can vote on it and it can become law. We often do this when legislators fail to address the issues that we want, right? We saw it in 2018. We said, hey, legislators, we want y'all to pass a law to allow returning citizens to have the right to vote. They said, we're not going to do that. And so we said, okay, we'll put it on the ballot and we'll do it ourselves. So we passed returning citizens having the right to vote. We saw it with minimum wage. We said, hey, we want you to increase the minimum wage. People can't survive on $8. They said, we don't want to do that. So we put it on the ballot and we passed a $15 minimum wage. We said, hey, we want you to provide medical cannabis for those who have certain medical conditions. We don't want to do that. Okay, we'll put it on the ballot and we'll go and do it. So this is a very important process in our democracy because it allows you to play a direct role in how things shape out. we have a representative democracy, and so we elect people to go and represent us in Tallahassee, but what happens when they don't represent our interests, right? So this is very important that we safeguard and protect this system. But as you can imagine, if you are someone who is an elected official, you would see this as an encroachment on your power, right? Because now you don't just hold all the power, you don't get to make all the rules, you don't get to make all the laws, but now that power is in the hands of voters. And voters tend to do things that you, as a politician, may disagree with. The perfect case of that was in 2018 when we passed Amendment 4. Amendment 4, if y'all may remember, plainly said that if someone has a felony conviction, once they serve their time, we want them to be able to have the right to vote. Well, the state, they took issue with you all passing Amendment 4, and they went in and they redefined what it means to complete your sentence. And so now in the state of Florida, even though you may have gotten out of jail and you're no longer incarcerated, unless you pay your fines and fees, okay, thank you. Unless you pay your fines and fees, you will not be able to vote here in the state of Florida. And so this process is just wildly important. And like I said, they basically have tried to attack it for many years. And this is despite us knowing that Florida already has the most difficult process that exists in the country, right? In order for a ballot amendment to pass, you need to collect almost 1 million signatures from all over the state, okay? Then you have to go before the Florida Supreme Court and have the language of your amendment approved. Then you have to go to the CFO and get a financial assessment of whether or not your amendment will have a financial impact on the state of Florida. And then when it gets to the ballot, you still need to have over 60% of voters approve it. So we have a very difficult process already, but they want to make it harder. And so this bill has now required that anyone collecting petitions, so if you have used to going out, something that you're passionate about, you're asking people to sign petitions, you now have to register as a petition circulator. And if you fail to register as a petition circulator and you collect over 25 or more petitions, you have now committed a felony in the state of Florida for asking people to sign a piece of paper. A felony. And so when we see laws like that, we have to pause and we have to say, well, why are we passing laws like this? Right? Like what is the goal here? And it's clear to me that the goal is to stop this very democratic process from having the power that it presently has. And so in addition to now requiring people to register to become petition collectors, you also, there's a new requirement that says you have to be a Florida resident and a U.S. citizen in order to collect petitions. That was something that they also included in the law. And then it says that they have shortened the amount of time that organizations have to turn in their petitions from 30 days just to 10 days. So as you can imagine, this will have a very chilling effect on this process. It's going to make it a lot harder for us to pass citizen-led initiatives. They even had been so far, we were able to successfully get this taken out, but they had a $1 million bond requirement in the first version of the bill that said before you even collect petitions, you have to put $1 million bond on with the state of Florida. And so it's just, really, it shows you the efforts and the length that they're going to try to take away this process. Next slide. Fortunately, there was a legal challenge to this, and so this is being worked out through the courts. They had asked for a permanent injunction to block the implementation of this, but the judge did not do a permanent, complete injunction. The judge did a partial injunction, and so the part that was blocked from going into effect had to do with the citizenship as well as the residency. The court ruled that there was no basis that they had evidence to suggest that Florida had a right to bar people who are not citizens or not Florida residents from collecting petitions, because you're not voting when you collect petitions. You're not, you're just simply saying, hey, would you sign this petition? So the court ruled that there's no reason that the state should have banned that, and that has been placed on hold. However, they did not block every other provision of the bill, one of which now allows supervisors of elections to not review your updated signature collection, but for every 90 days. And the reason this is important is because if you know, and if you do petition collection, you know that you need to verify how well you're doing towards your goal, right? And so if the goal, let's say, is you have to collect 10,000 petitions, we need the supervisor of elections office to say, hey, you're at 5,000, you're at 6,000, you're at 7,000. Well, now the state of Florida has put in place a new law that says the supervisors of elections office has 90 days to certify and review whether or not a petition is valid or not. And so when you talk about when you're getting close to your deadline of trying to meet your number, you could not know that you haven't met your number because they haven't provided you the verification that all of the positions have been verified. So just a really, really impactful hit on our democracy. I want to make one announcement. There's a red Toyota, a red Kia that is outside and your trunk is open. So there's a red Kia, your trunk is open. I don't know if you may have pressed your keys by mistake, but if you have a red Kia or a red vehicle, this is on the safe side. You might want to go and check. All right, next slide, please. All right, so the next 3 slides all sort of hinge around what I just talked about with the ballot initiative process. And that is political advertisement by government officials. Next slide, please. I'm going to kind of have you, if you can, just kind of go back and forth for a second. So, next slide. Use of statewide resources to influence statewide ballot initiatives. One more slide. And then the Hope Florida scandal. Okay, so you can go back 2 for me, please. All right, so those 3 slides all really hinge around what's happening with the fight to take away your power through direct democracy and the ballot initiative process. First and foremost, last year in November, you all had initiatives on your ballot that would have enabled you to do a number of things. 2 of those things were ensure a person has a right to reproductive access and reproductive care by way of ensuring that a person had a right to an abortion here in the state of Florida. Well, the governor took exception to that, right? He didn't want that to pass. The other one that was for the use of recreational marijuana in the state. The governor, he just absolutely did not want either one of those amendments to pass. And he did everything in his power to use his influence to stop it. And so much so that he asked his general counsel's office and his office to send a letter to the broadcasters who were airing television commercials in favor of those amendments, that if they did not stop airing those commercials, they could face legal challenges. And so, as you can imagine, if you're a broadcaster, right, you get a letter from the governor of the state, and you may say, okay, well, I need to pull that ad down, because I don't want to hold myself liable. I don't want to get into any legal or civil trouble. And so that is an attack on democracy, right? You don't get to weaponize the office of the governor to threaten your opponents. And so there was a bill this year that said, basically would have stopped that. It said that the governor would not be able to use his influence to stop a organization or a broadcasting station from playing commercials or anything that he or she may disagree with. Next slide. And then the next thing that we saw was the use of taxpayer dollars to create your own commercials. So we saw, typically during the election season, you see commercials for something or against something, right? Well, the state of Florida created this those amendments. And so they use your tax dollars to create commercials to run on television to try to help defeat those amendments. And as you can imagine, people were upset with that because they felt like the government had no role in playing, participating in such a political effort. And so there was another bill that said the state would not be able to use state resources to weaponize and create commercials on things such as that. Next slide. And then the granddaddy of them all, the ultimate way that we know this administration had issue is with what happened with Hope, Florida. So chances are, if you're here on a Saturday morning, you already know about Hope, Florida. But I just want to briefly touch on why this is important, is because, it just shows what great lengths people were willing to go to stop youth from having a voice. And I would hope that that inspires you to use that voice even more. So I just talked about how the governor didn't want those amendments to pass. Well, he went as far as to directing money that was supposed to come to the state of Florida from a settlement with a healthcare provider who had overbilled the state of Florida. They had overbilled the state of Florida by the tune of $67 million. The state of Florida saw that they had been overbilled. They entered into an agreement with this company to pay back the money to the state of Florida. These were tax dollars. The state of Florida then said, I think we should take $10 million of that money and divert it to a nonprofit organization called Hope, Florida. Hope, Florida is a nonprofit organization that's closely aligned with the governor and his wife, and they have a stated mission of helping people to navigate bureaucracy, recover from storms, get jobs, and things like that. Nothing is political in their mission or the work that they do. So it came as a surprise when the state had given this organization $10 million of taxpayer dollars, only to find out that Hope, Florida then took about $8.5 million of that money and they gave it to political action committees that were working to defeat Amendment 3 and 4. And so here we have a very clear violation and misuse of tax dollars. And this is something that was unearthed in the middle of session. And so the governor thought that this would be business as usual, and that his buddies in the legislature would sort of turn the other eye and not make any hay of this. But the Speaker of the House, who's a Republican, he said, no, we're not going to just turn the other eye. And they launched a committee to start investigating this and looking into why was taxpayer money given to this nonprofit, who then turned around and gave a political contribution to defeat a ballot initiative. Now, what complicates this whole Hope, Florida scandal is the person who was the governor's chief of staff at the time was a guy by the name of James Uthmeyer. James Uthmeyer served as the governor's chief of staff, but he also did double duty, and he served as the chairman of the political action committee that this money ultimately ended up going to. So if you can just kind of visualize with me for a moment. The governor's chief of staff, who we know is often the highest ranking official in the office, hears about this settlement and says, hey, why don't we redirect 10 million of that to Hope, Florida, because he knew that he had influence over Hope, Florida. And then once that 10 million got to Hope, Florida, somehow or another, they convinced the people in control of Hope, Florida to take that money and then give to a political action committee that he chairs. So you misdirected funding to now end up, I'm coming to you in 1 second, now ends up in this entity that you control, and then they use that money to help defeat those amendments. Well, the problem here is that James Uthmeyer is no longer the governor's chief of staff. He's now the attorney general for the entire state of Florida. And so when you talk about accountability, right, we know that the attorney general ordinarily would be the person that we can count on to get to the bottom, to investigate, to find out why was there such a gross negligence and violation of taxpayer dollars. But now all of that is into question because the very person who needs to be investigated is at the heart of said investigation. And so, this case is, from what I understand, was referred to the prosecutor's office in Tallahassee, Leon County. And this is something that we're watching to see how it unfolds. Certainly, we know that this is a different outcome based on who the key players are, because had it been any of our organizations, had it been any of us, misappropriating tax dollars in this way, we would already be months into our sentence by now. Yes, sir, you had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, so somehow the governor was able to send a cease and desist order to the Orlando Sentinel, who did the investigation behind this corrupt diversion of funds to the Hope Foundation. And I'm not sure if you got the Attorney General, who may have been Hufmeyer or not, but I mean, he's trying to squash the voices of the people who are investigating.
That's right.
That's awesome. Thank you.
No, thank you for that context. And I think it builds on what we just saw with him sending the letters for them to pull down the advertisements. Like, they are of the belief that they can use the office of the governor to weaponize and to really concentrate power in a way that allows them to avoid accountability. And, I don't know if they'll ever be able to get to the end of it. I just saw a report yesterday because they were trying to say that they didn't know about the transfer of this money. I don't know how the governor's office can say they didn't know about $10 million being moved, but nevertheless, they're trying to say that they didn't know. But a reporter just recently unearthed an email where Hope, Florida was on the agenda for the executive office of the governor, and after that meeting, there was a change in the contract of how that money was supposed to come back to the state. So whatever happened in that meeting clearly showed that there was a directive to move that money. And I really hope they are held accountable for it. I do have, like many of you who hear that the Attorney General is at the lead here, I do have concerns. And then obviously there was a lawmaker who said, I'm taking this all the way to the FBI. The FBI is going to hear about this. And I told him, well, you know who's in control of the FBI? I said, so, our best bet is local prosecutors, bringing charges, because I can tell you right now, the FBI, with this administration, they will use that as a benefit, right? To say, well, if I withhold my charges of you, or if I withhold investigating you, what can you give me out of this, right? That's this pay-to-play system that we see under this current administration. So I don't know how much hope we're going to have there. But at this time, I'd like to now bring up a good friend of mine, Rachel, with the Legal Defense Fund for NAACP. Rachel is a great friend of our organization. They do incredible work. And one of the bills, next slide please, that we are working to push forward is the Harry T. and Harry V. Moore Florida Voting Rights Act. This is legislation that we wrote a few years back to try to safeguard our democracy, because Florida is notorious for passing voter suppression laws. And so Rachel would come now and just talk a little bit about the Florida VRA and what it means and the impact of it.
Hi all, good morning. So my name is Rachel Carter. I work at the Legal Defense Fund, and if you're unfamiliar with us, we are a historic civil rights organization founded by former Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. So we've been steadfast in working to advance the rights for Black citizens, and part of that work that I do is focused on advancing the rights of Black voters, right? And so additionally in that work, we are steadfast in focusing on advancing state voting rights acts, because as we all know, they are very, very focused on getting rid of the federal Voting Rights Act, which how many of y'all are familiar with the federal Voting Rights Act? It's okay if you don't, because, we're all young in here, it was 6 years ago. And so, funnily enough, this month is actually the 60-year anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. And that bill is actually the entire reason all of us have an easy time to go to vote. We do not have to pass literacy tests. We're not discriminated based on our race, our sex, our gender. And so that is truly the foundations of what voting is currently in America. And so, as you know, they are trying to get rid of it. They are trying to reduce it. And we are currently in court right now at the Supreme Court. And now they are trying to go steadfast and reduce it through redistricting. But part of that work is to pass state voting rights acts. And so what state voting rights acts are is basically taking the model of the Federal Voting Rights Act and molding it to the state, providing protections that are centered around those voters. And so the Florida Voting Rights Act, which we modeled, are named after Harry T. and Harriet B. Moore, who are legendary civil rights activists here in Florida who were instrumental in registering hundreds of thousands of Black voters in Florida and were tragically killed by the KKK in the 1960s. And so off of their work, off of their legacy, we wanted to name our bill after them, which, tries to, again, reestablish and reaffirm the rights for all voters in Florida. And so part of that, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty. If you are super nerdy about voting rights and vote dilution and things like that, come talk to me. But essentially this bill, provides those protections against voter intimidation, reaffirms and expands a lot of the voter registration. So, same-day voter registration, election holidays, things like that. And in addition, we're expanding a vote by mail, which, as many of you, if any of you in this room have voted by mail last election, please go reapply for your vote by mail ballot because due to legislation passed in 2021, I believe, every 2 years, voters who vote by mail will have to reapply for that ballot. So we are at the end of the last cycle. It was 2023, 2024. New cycle starts 2025. So please, if you vote by mail, please reapply for that. But yes, that's what our bill does. And in addition, finally, our bill also allows for returning citizens to have an easier time of voting. They have all of these now barriers, and our bill reduces those barriers and allows people who have the right to vote. Florida voters gave them that right to vote, so we are bringing back that right to vote. Next slide. And so, again, I really recommend reading up on Harry T. and Harriet B. Moore. There's actually a museum in Central Florida as well. They are truly impactful NAACP members. And I also want to shout out our bill sponsors. So, unfortunately, due to the tragic passing of Senator Geraldine Thompson, who was our bill sponsor, who was also a massive voting rights champion in the Florida legislature, she was honestly what's the word I'm looking for? Truly brought this idea of a Florida Voting Rights Act to us and said, I want to bring the work that you guys have done in other states, because we have passed voting rights acts, state voting rights acts in a number of states, and most recently Minnesota. And she wanted to bring it to Florida and to give Florida voters a future and a vision of what voting can look like, because, we spend a lot of time thinking about the negative legislation. Oh, this legislation is taking this away. This legislation is taking this away. When in reality, we want to model a vision of what voting can look like in Florida and what voting should look like. And so Senator Thompson, we truly thank her for her vision of building and being the starter of this movement. And so now we now have Senator Tracy Davis, who is our Senate sponsor. And in addition, we have the incredible Representative Gracie Davis, who is such a champion of this bill. I highly recommend, if you have not heard her speak on this bill, please do. She is so powerful and inspiring. And so if you want more information, because I know time is, we have some resources on all of the provisions of the Florida Voting Rights Act, and please, Equal Ground does a day at the Capitol, and we have a fun little rally where we talk about the Voting Rights Act, and I'm there, so if you want to come see me again, come see me next year at the Florida Voting Rights Rally, and I'll pass it back to Jenna.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and we're just really grateful for the partnership. Oh, there's some water up there. I just got my water. I didn't know it's water. We appreciate your partnership and the work that you do. And again, if you don't know Harry T. and Harriet B. Moore, please, that is your homework. To go home and research their names and learn their stories. Because we know about Dr. King, we know about Malcolm X, and Rosa Parks, and Dr. Bethune. But these were people who were killed in 1951. So just think, Dr. King gave the I Have a Dream speech in 1963. in Washington, D.C. So we all love to talk about the I Have a Dream speech. But in 1951, they were murdered, right? Well before King came on the scene, well before the Montgomery bus boycott. They had already lived a life of service dedicated to their community, and they were killed for it, only because they dared to believe that Black people had a voice in the civic engagement process. So it's very personal to us. Equal Ground is a Black-led voting rights organization to move forward, carrying legislation that bears their name. Obviously, we know it is falling on deaf ears in the current climate of the legislature, but it's important that we continue to persist on that very important bill. Next slide. So we're going to try to, I got one more. This bill here is Florida's version of the SAVE Act. How many are familiar with the SAVE Act? All right, so the SAVE Act is a national movement to ensure that you must be you must be a resident of, you must be a citizen, citizenship, to ensure citizenship, proof of citizenship in order to vote. Now, we know that undocumented people are not participating in our elections. So this is essentially a problem, a solution to a problem that does not exist. There's a lot of fear mongering, there's a lot of mis and disinformation as it relates to who is able to participate in our elections and who is participating in our elections. And so if this were to be enacted, it would have monumental consequences because it would disenfranchise so many people who desire to participate in our elections. And so by requiring proof of citizenship, whether that be through having a passport, right, that's not accessible to everybody. Whether that's for getting the documentation to prove your citizenship, right? If I challenge y'all right now to go put your hands on that and come back to me in 2 hours, right, you probably wouldn't be able to do that. And so we know that that is something that we have to be mindful of. And then when we talk about a poll tax, right, it can look differently. You know, so it may, back then it may have been an actual financial assessment that you had to pay. But now if you have to go and get a passport, right, that's a multi-$100 expense to get a passport, right? And so that's not just real for everybody. So we want to make sure that we're safeguarding our democracy, and there's no need to require an additional step of proof of citizenship because that's already not happening in our elections process. But what made Florida's version of this bill so bad is because it went further than just requiring proof of citizenship. And we're happy that we were able to work to advocate that this be defeated. Just quite candidly, I think the defeat of this had more to do with the infighting of the Republican conference than it had to do with our advocacy. I would love to say that it was all because of our advocacy, but the reality is if they wanted to pass this, they had the votes to do it, but it was just a split priority of Senate leadership and the House leadership, and it ultimately ended up failing. So we benefited from it, but this version, it went further because not only would it have eliminated not only would it have required proof of citizenship to be able to vote, but it would have eliminated certain forms of identification. So that's what makes it much more dangerous. And so when we talk about student IDs, when you talk about banking and debit cards, which is often used as a secondary form of identification, right, those would have all been eliminated. And so we're asking ourselves, well, why are we rolling back access? If anything, we should be providing more opportunities for people to identify themselves and be eligible to vote. And so we know that that would have had a major impact on college campuses, had student IDs no longer been accepted as a form of acceptable identification. Additionally, this bill would have cut the mandatory early voting time in the state from 15 days down to 10 days, right? Again, what are we doing in 2025 where we're rolling back on time? We should be giving more time for people to vote, not less. And then lastly, the most troubling part of this bill was it expanded the RICO charge. And it viewed it through the lens of saying that voting rights organizations could potentially be charged under the RICO Act for simply trying to enfranchise our communities. And so it now has the dangerous provision in there for that. So fortunately, this bill did fail, but again, we have to be vigilant and mindful when we see these type of attacks on our democracy. And so now I'm going to bring forth Jackie Steele. who's going to close us out with some other portions of the presentation, and then we're going to make sure that we open up for questions. So I really want to get into Q&A. So thank you, Jackie.
Thank you all, and thank you, Genesis, as well. So, next slide. One of the bills, and we're getting into education, and it's right that I'm a mom of 10, and right now I have 6 of them that are in school, but the school start time, and also as a oh, I'm sorry. Also, as a person who has worked with schools, the school start time is actually repealing that 2023 law that came in. It was supposed to go into effect in 2026, but what happened? Most of our counties, especially in Atlanta County schools, was like, wait a minute, we already have a school bus driver shortage. Let us determine, not the state, not Tallahassee determine, but let each local. So this is one of those kind of preemptive laws that the legislature continues to pass. And so this one, it was passed with no opposition. We had no opposition on this bill, but it's actually a pretty good bill. It gets back home rule for those school boards, can kind of set what time they want to start middle, high school, and elementary. Next slide. Now, this bill we oppose. This is another education bill. It's House Bill 1105, and it includes some sweeping education reforms. And one of the things I really want to hone in on this one is it allows some outside entities to kind of gain control of your charter school process. And we know with the charter school process, we want our school boards, our duly elected officials, to be able to approve the school boards, be able to approve those charter schools. So if you have outside entities now coming in and being able to start a charter school, especially those job engines where they're created by municipalities, things like that, that take away the people that you have elected to review and make sure that we are doing the right things for our children. This was passed. Some of those provisions include streamlined conversion, eliminates teachers and school administrators from being able to be in that decision process. Some other kind of negative aspects, there's a total cell phone ban. It's aimed at improving focus, but this strict ban makes it heavily restricted in terms of intentionally disrupting learning accommodations. Also, that certificate of completion. Some of our students with disabilities, they spend time there. It takes that certificate of completion so that in fallback who don't have the standard diploma, they don't have an immediate replacement. So when we take things away, we always want something to replace that. So when we start looking, the legislature takes things away, it's like, wait a minute, that was there for a reason. What was the reason? If it's no longer there, what do we do in place of? And then exclusion of educators and policy decisions. Anytime we take educators out of policy decisions in our schools, that means we are not getting the right pedagogy. We're not making sure that educators are at a seat at the table. So if they're not at the table, guess what? They're probably on the menu. That means if they're not there, then things that happen with our students, their needs are not being met as well. Next slide. And then this one is really important. We know how it allows the U.S. state or District of Columbia to join the agreement by passing legislation that mandates each member state conduct a statewide election for president and vice president. So with this, the electoral college will be abolished. And if you look at that, you may be able to see this. We didn't. This one was defeated. We did support this because when we look at it, as of April 2025, 17 states, as well as the District of Columbia, have adopted this. And we know in the United States, our electoral college is who elects our president. We want the popular vote. If we look at our last, when Donald Trump won his first election, he did not win the popular vote. And that is very important. That's our vote, not someone and kind of collecting them all together. So this is something that we definitely supported. It was defeated, and that was House Bill 33 and Senate Bill 208. Next slide. This one is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm so very happy that it was opposed. And I think also with the other, next slide. Sorry. Next slide. Okay, thank you. This one is on the official actions of local governments with respect to DEI. And this is one of those, another preemptive bill from Tallahassee. This one went so far as to create civil and criminal penalties for local elected officials if they decided to adopt DEI policies. So this prohibits the adoption of any ordinances, any resolutions, any programs or policies on the local level. Well, we don't need Tallahassee telling if Leon County or if Okaloosa County or if Walton County wanted to have a program for people with disabilities. We don't need Tallahassee saying that this, you can't have an ordinance for that. Because a lot of people, when they think of DEI, the first thing they want to think of is race. But diversity, equity, and inclusion is about including everyone. And so when we have our veterans, when we have disabilities, when we have LGBTQ, all of those things are an umbrella. When we have older persons and younger persons, all of that falls up under the DEI umbrella. So if we have Tallahassee telling our local municipalities, hey, you can't even touch that, we're going to tell you what to do. So this is another one of those preemptive bills. And I think this one kind of fell with the infighting. Very excited that it did because it would have wreaked havoc on our local governments. There are a lot of local governments that have enacted policies because Tallahassee won't, to protect our most vulnerable people. Next slide. This one is another one, land management. It was passed, we supported it. It makes clear a requirement for public hearings on all new or revised conservation and non-conservation land management plans. And I think this bill came about, you probably heard there was a plan to put pickleball courts and resorts on our state lands. You know, there's a reason why they are protected lands. Do we want a pickleball court? Do we want resorts on our protected lands? No, they're protected for a reason. We have very sensitive lands here. You think about our sand dunes and those things. You don't want that here. So this was passed. It's called the State Park Preservation Act, and we're very happy that it was passed. Next slide. This is Senate Bill 382, rent of affordable housing dwelling units. This bill was aimed to protect tenants in affordable housing by prohibiting landlords from raising rent in the middle of the lease term. I don't understand why this was not supported by everyone. If you have a lease, you have decided upon this is the term for that lease. A landlord should not be in the middle of your lease term deciding upon whether, well, now, you know what, I'm going to move the needle or move the radar. So despite having some strong community support, both of these bills died in committee during session. So signaling this kind of ongoing resistance to tenant protection measures in Florida. So, you know, the governor touts that we're the free state of Florida, but when it comes to preserving the rights of the citizens of Florida, we don't necessarily see that. And this would have most definitely protected the rights of those that are tenants, and not just young people, but our elderly. We have a very large elderly population, and we want to make sure a lot of them are on fixed incomes. So do you want the landlord coming in and changing that right in the middle? No, you selected that lease for a reason.
I just want to add one thing to what Jackie just so excellently laid out. This is for a very specific type of lease, right? So I just want to be very clear about that. If you're renting and you have a lease and you don't have an affordable housing lease, you 9 times out of 10 they can't just increase your rent. So I don't want people to think that they can just go up on people's rent despite a lease. But what happened is people who have affordable housing contracts, right, and they're on special affordable housing programs, they may have to pay a percentage of their income. And that percentage that they pay is based on federal rates, right? And so if the federal rate shifts in the middle of their lease, that now is an expectation that you pay based on that new rate. And so what this bill is looking to do is to say, okay, we don't mind adjusting it, but adjust it after the lease. Because if a person entered into a lease saying my rate is 10% of my income, just because the federal rate goes up to 15%, you shouldn't be able to get that. You shouldn't be able to do that in the middle of a lease. And so this is a very specific type of lease and for certain types of agreements. It's not a blanket across the board for all leases, but it's still very important and it should have been enacted. So I just want to clarify that.
I'm sorry, definitely like for those Section 8 ones. I'm sorry, I had a note. Sorry about that. Next slide. Next slide. So the employment of minors, this is Senate Bill 918. It was defeated. This one sought to significantly weaken Florida's child labor protections by rolling back those restrictions. So as we see, as we are ramping up on taking those immigrants outside of our community, I guess the thought process is, well, let's get our youth to fill those roles. So with that, they proposed allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to work unlimited hours, including overnight shifts, without required meal breaks, and extending kind of similar allowances to 14 and 15-year-olds. And I don't know about you, I have a 13-year-old. I'm not going to, ma'am. So under certain circumstances, such as homeschooling or graduation, so these bills also remove DDPR from their authority to grant those employment waivers. Critics had argued that these changes, and we were among those, erode those long-standing safeguards to make sure that we're not exploiting, and we've got over 110 Florida youth, that this would have threatened both their health, their education, and their well-being. So both of these bills ultimately failed during the session, but it may be back. And this is just things added on when they passed in 2024 House Bill 433. So we were very happy that this was defeated, and we did oppose this as well. This next one, next slide. This is on utility disconnections, and this is Senate Bill 330 and House Bill 419. It's proposed some very critical protections against utility disconnection during extreme weather. So like today, a day like today, where there's a heat advisory out, and we know these heat advisories have been popping up on our phone for the last 2 weeks. So think about if this bill was to prohibit electric, public utility, and water services providers from cutting off utilities. And so say your utility bill, because it's been really hot, $400 or $500, you're on a fixed income, you haven't been able to pay your utility bill. Well, this would have made sure that your utilities would not have been disconnected because you could not pay, and there's a heat advisory. Well, this was defeated. The legislation would have safeguarded those vulnerable populations, such as seniors, those medically fragile individuals, low-income families, from heat-related health risks. Both bills did die in committee in the session, underscoring a missed opportunity for us to safeguard Florida's most vulnerable populations in the extreme weather, because we know it's getting hot, and these heat advisories are becoming more of the norm and not the exception. And coming off of 2024, which was the hottest year on record, as long as we've been keeping records, and they're saying 2025 is set to beat that record. So as we are globally warming, things like these bills, when we're saying we want to be free, we want to help everyone, this should have been kind of a no-brainer. Everyone should have been running to co-sponsor and then make sure this bill is passed, but it was defeated. Next slide. And next slide. This next bill, the Monument Bill, Senate Bill 1816 and House Bill 1599, it was defeated and opposed. On the screen, you do see a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee that's being removed. And this is kind of a blowback to the statues that were being removed after the George Floyd incident in 2020. So this is known collectively as the Historic Florida Monuments and Memorials Protection Act. But this is to aim, again, another preemption bill to preempt local authorities from removing, damaging, or destroying public monuments or memorials over 25 years old and establish kind of a state level enforcement. The bill sought to strip local governments of their power to even, if they're in good faith, something that was put up in the 20s. And they're like, you know what? No one wants this here. We've all decided that that statute needs to go. Well, this bill was aimed to preempt that and even give people the opportunity to file civil suits or carry penalties of up to $1,000 for officials if they were to remove these. So this was defeated, and we did vehemently oppose this. Next slide. This next bill in Northwest Florida, where we know economic opportunity, healthcare access, and youth empowerment are some vital concerns in this community. Several impactful bills that were championed by members of our Florida Legislative Black Caucus stood out to us, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of them, and that's why it says some bills. House Bill 195 opened the door for incarcerated individuals by aligning prison education with professional licensure. So if they're in prison and they're working towards some professional licensure, this supports their reentry. So it opens the door for that. House Bill 827, Senate Bill 936, ensures that Florida prepares for job disruptions of automation. So basically, AI, it set forth a study so we could study what those job interruptions would be. The next one, Senate Bill 184, offers some cost relief to renters through usable screening reports. So that way, if you are applying for multiple homes within, you don't have to pay those multiple application fees, which could range, some of them range from $50 all the way up to $300. So if you're applying for under one kind of umbrella, and they've got maybe 6 things, well, that one application fee could go on. So that definitely helps those with low income. House Bill 141 removes out-of-pocket costs for breast screenings for state employees. So very good in terms of just safeguarding the health and safety of our state employees. House Bill 1405 brings forward much-needed juvenile justice reform, emphasizing on early intervention and supports the over-incarceration of our youth. Together, these measures reflect the caucus's commitment to addressing the systemic challenges with real-world solutions for everyday Floridians, and specifically here in Northwest Florida. Next slide. And next, these are some important dates to remember, and I'm not sure if you can see this. In the first two, 2BA announced or organizational sessions or your county delegation meetings. And these are things we've been looking for because a lot of these delegation meetings, you will have to register in advance. And your county delegation meeting is a meeting where you can go in and you can have a conversation and hear the priorities of your local legislative delegation. So Genesis showed you who your legislators were at the beginning of the slide. This is where, if you're in Okaloosa County or if you're in Escambia or Santa Rosa, Walton, any of those counties, they have legislative delegation meetings. This is where you can go, and you can also have a conversation. You can go in and talk and give public comment. So as soon as we find those dates out, we will definitely put those out on our website. We are constantly reviewing all of the legislative delegation websites and talking to our legislators to figure out when to have these delegation meetings, because this is the time where you can come in and talk about your priorities. They're going to talk about theirs. You can talk in support or in opposition to some of their priorities, so you can get your voice heard. And a lot of times, if you cannot make it to Tallahassee, this is a great opportunity for you to be face-to-face with your legislators. Session starts very early next year. It starts in January. So those committee weeks will start October 6th. So So our committee weeks, if you have an opportunity to go in, this is where you can literally kill a bill. If you come in and you're speaking to opposition, a lot of times if you're looking on the Florida News Channel, and you'll see those rooms are pretty empty. But if we can come in, and I know sometimes it's really hard to get to Tallahassee, but if you can get there before that bill goes through all of the committee stops, then you can relatively kill bills. So these are the committee weeks. They go from October 6th all the way to December 15th. Legislative session starts January 13th. And then very special, February 3rd to the 4th, this is our Equal Ground and Clergy Day at the Capitol. So you will have an opportunity to sign up for that. You can sign up. We will send you a link for that. We will get you to sign up for the Equal Ground Clergy Day at the Capitol. And then, of course, the last day of the legislative session is March 13th. Next slide. Then, our partners from the Legal Defense Fund talked about vote by mail, and each one of your folders is a card that has a QR code. You want to get your vote by mail. You want to do this, there's a QR code on your handout. You can either register to vote, update your polling information, but vote by mail, we talked about that earlier. You just want to check your status, and if you have not re-registered for your vote by mail ballot, it's one of those things I like to have it rather than not have it, just in case. Most of the time I'm working on election day, so if I have not early voted, I have my vote by mail ballot. I can just drop it off and keep it moving, and my vote counts. Next slide. Healthcare is on the ballot. Genesis talked about the ballot initiative. Florida Decides Healthcare. I think they're still out collecting petitions to get Florida Decides Healthcare on the ballot so that we can amend the Constitution to address that coverage gap, to allow citizens who make up to a certain amount to access affordable and quality health care. So if you see them out, please, if you have not signed one of those petitions, please do, so that we can have health care on the ballot in 2026. Next slide. And then it is 2025, and we know that those 2030, the census will be there. We are getting ready, getting geared up for the census. We know that some are already geared up for the, you've heard about what's going on in Texas. Genesis talked about the redistricting process, but the census is coming up, so you do want to get ready. It's very important for us to have a very accurate census. In our 2020 census, 750,000 people were undercounted. That portion is nearly $1.5 trillion that we could have pulled down from the federal government. So we want to make sure that we are counted. So please, please, please spread the word that the census is coming up. When you get that in your mailbox, you want to make sure that that's completed. And then, the Equal Ground Tour, as you know, we are on our final days of the tour. I know Genesis is very excited as he gets to stay home a little bit, but we do have 2 more stops on the tour. So if you are wanting to follow us, we will be in Leon County on August 23rd, and then St. Johns County on August 24th. Next slide. And then I know we have quite a few of you all that join us for our Black Political Empowerment Call. Please join us this Monday as we do talk about the Florida redistricting and the census. So we go in depth into that. So please join us this Monday, August 18th at 7 p.m. And you can go onto our website, www.equal-ground.com to register for this. Next slide. And then if you happen to be in DC on September 24th, please join us for the 54th Annual Legislative Conference. If you're interested in joining any of the meetings or meeting with members of Congress to discuss issues that matter to not only your community, but the state of Florida as a whole or the United States as a whole, specifically voting rights, economic mobility, and impact of that big, ugly bill. We definitely encourage you to email us at info@equalground if you want additional information. But we will be in DC September 24th and 28th for the annual legislative conference. And lastly, next slide. Stay connected with us. And by you being here, we know that you are connected with us. So we thank you. But we are on all social media. You can also text Equal Ground, one word, to 52886 using your phone, or you can get us on via email or on our website, www.equal-ground.com. No?
Thank you so much, Jackie. Give Jackie a hand. Really appreciate you closing us out. You did an excellent job. Thank you very much. So I want to entertain a few questions, but before we do, I'd like to bring up Brother Jamil Davis with Black Voters Matter. He's a good friend of the organization and also a partner. Want to share some information about their upcoming bus tour. So Jamil, the floor is yours.
Good yes, I looked at my watch. It's still afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. First and foremost, thank you all for coming. Y'all could have been anywhere else on Saturday, but y'all chose to be here to get some of this quality information from Equal Ground. So let's give it up for Equal Ground first and foremost. There's some dynamic partners that's in the building. Of course, we got Real Women Radio, Northwest Florida Coalition of Civic Engagement, the great kind of people over at the Okaloosa NAACP, many others. So give yourselves applause as well. Wonderful. As stated, my name is Jamil Davis. I am the North Florida lead regional organizer for Black Voters Matter. Anything that sits on I-10, from the West End all the way to the East End, that's me. So, why is that important, you ask? I'm glad y'all asked. Last week of April for this year, last week of April, we are having our Black August Freedom Bus Tour. Anybody that is well familiar with Black Voters Matter, you know we have what we consider the blackest bus in America. I don't mean one of these, small, although we got some of those too, but I mean the bus, the big, huge bus. And the big, huge bus will be starting in North Florida. Why is that important? Because the very first date of the bus tour is August the 28th. August 28th. And we will begin in the wonderful, lovely city of Pensacola, Florida on August the 28th. More information will be coming on our website, which is Black Voters Matter Fund, FUND.org, or if you go with the social medias, it's Black Voters MTR, and that's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Black Voters MTR is where we're at on all social media. That information will be coming on the social medias. Everything starts, as I said, August the 28th in Pensacola, Florida. August the 29th, I heard that there's some people in here from Bay County. Bay County people that's still in here, raise your hand, please. Wonderful, delightful. We will be in Panama City on August the 29th. So, Pensacola is starting everything off for the bus tour, August 28th. August 29th, we are in Panama City. August 30th, we're in Jacksonville, and we end everything on August 31st in Gainesville, Florida. Y'all want more information around our bus tour and what the objectives of the bus tour will be, come see me during lunchtime, or once again, Black Voters MTR on all the social medias. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you very much, Jamil, and we appreciate the partnership with Black Voters Matter. All right, well, I know that was a lengthy presentation. I want to thank y'all for bearing with us. I know it's a lot to take in all at once, particularly when it's unpleasant information at times. But I do appreciate y'all for bearing through that, because I think, the more that we learn, the more that we educate ourselves around these issues, the better we can be at combating and stopping it and charting charting a new path. And so I sincerely thank y'all for being here today. But at this time, if there are any questions, Jackie's walking around with the mic. Feel free to raise your hand and we can entertain any questions or things that may not have been covered. No questions. That might be a first on the tour side. I don't know if that's a testament of how tired y'all are or how good we did. I'll go with the latter. Yes.
Okay. My question is, Rachel, on the VM.
You said every 2 years?
Yes, it's the election cycle is every 2 years. So starting, we just started the new cycle, 2025 to 2026, and 2026. So January 1st, 2027, rolls are still like clean. You have to reapply once again.
Okay. Spoke with my SOE on Thursday, and she was telling me that I have to do this every year. So you're saying every 2 years?
It is by law, it's every 2 years. So she should not say every year, but you will, like, if you check on your value, let's say you go in, you apply today, you can say through, and it will be through 2026. That's November 2026.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yes.
Who's your SOE, by the way?
I mean, I'm just, when you made that statement, and I'm thinking this is for Florida,
Yeah.
well, then my SOE should have been on the same page,
Yes.
regardless of the county.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay.
Which county are you in?
She don't want to spill the beans on it. Yes. Well, no, thank you. And honestly, though, I will say that there's a lot of misinformation on that, sometimes unintentional, because people say you have to re-request your ballot every election, or you have to do it every year. And it's really a distinction there, because it's every election cycle. And so a cycle would be 2 years. So if you voted in 2024 and you desire to vote in 2025 or 2026, you have to make a new request. And once you make that request, it's valid through that cycle. You don't have to make it every time there's an election. So if you want to vote, if there's a municipal election in 2025, and then the gubernatorial election, as long as you register once, you'll be good for those 2 years. But come the next cycle, you'll need to make a new request. And we're working really hard to repeal that, because it has a big impact on turnout. When that went into effect, we had 4.2 million people on the roll set to receive a vote by mail ballot. This most recent election in 2024, I think we got on the high end of like 3.8 or 3.9. So we were never able to fully get back to our original number of 4.2. And that's going to continue to happen election after election after election, because it's really hard work to get people. And the reason they did it is because they knew in 2020, what happened in 2020? Y'all remember what happened in 2020? COVID. And what happened with COVID? People wanted to enroll for vote by mail. So we had the highest ever in the history of our state roll of people saying, hey, send me a ballot. And for the people that didn't want people to vote and have access to the ballot, that's why they made that change. So we got to be very vigilant on that.
Genesis, I do have an answer to your question about the savings for those tax breaks. For the back to school holiday, it's estimated to save $217 million annually. For the Second Amendment holiday, it's estimated to save $44.8 million. And then gun items only, $8 million. And then for the NASCAR ticket exemption, it's undetermined at the present time.
Thank you. Thank you for getting clarity on that, Jackie. That's good. God bless you. Any other questions? Yes.
One of the first slides I saw that you had C3 and C4.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit about the difference?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So we're both a C3 and a C4 organization. Essentially, C3 meaning a lot of nonpartisan activity. C4 meaning we can be a little bit more political. We do most of our advocacy work under our C4 umbrella, just to be on the safe side, because we're asking legislators to take an action on something. It's most organizations, I won't say most, but a lot of organizations are either, right? It's very rare that you have organizations that have both distinctions. It's important to us to have both distinctions so that we can show up fully in this work, right? We want to be able to educate, but we also want to be able to be real and honest about who are the people that need to lead us out of the things that we're seeing. So, yes, we're both C3 and C4. I will say that most of the work that we do, though, is under the C3. Like It's very rare. We have only endorsed 3 candidates in the history of the organization, and they've all been federal candidates, presidential and then a Senate race. So we rarely, activate, if you will, but it's very important to be able to be honest. A lot of times people, and this is for all the nonprofits in the room, any nonprofit, you have a nonprofit or affiliated with a nonprofit. I want to say this, because you just kind of made me think about this. A lot of organizations are fearful of what they're able to do because of the taxing structure and the laws, and you should certainly care, right? You should certainly want to stay into compliance. But I want to let you know that just because you're a C3 nonpartisan organization does not prevent you from speaking out and advocating for things that are good for your community. And so don't allow that tax structure to prevent you from being good advocates, because C3s are able to advocate, but there's just limits, and it's a way that it has to be done. So I just want to, give that acknowledgement, because that's very important. I'll come to you next. Yes.
I just had one question. So, like, obviously, everyone in this room is pretty engaged with everything. What are the things that we can do that we can all take? Like, what would you say are the top 2 or 3 things that we can all take to our families or our friends that will make an impact and spread everything that you've shared with us today? Are there maybe like 2 or 3 things that you want us to kind of spread that message everywhere we can?
So the 2 things that I would say are first and foremost, get educated on the issue. I think we take for granted information and how powerful it could be. My grandmother, bless her heart, has a saying that people would do better if they knew better. And I firmly believe that, because a lot of what we're seeing, a lot of what is happening, people don't know. They're just checked out, trying to survive, trying to make it. When I go on this tour, and I mention Hope, Florida, and they hear like, oh my God, they stole taxpayer dollar, like that activates something in people to want to get engaged and to be involved in that fight. And so I think we can never underestimate the power of education. And so, like, as leaders in our communities, we should be educated on the issues, but sharing that information, sharing it with other people so that they understand it. The second thing that I'll say is that we have to understand that civic engagement is not a spectator sport. For too often, you have people who think that they've done their due diligence when they go and vote, and then they go home and sit down until the next election. And, we just have to move from that. I like to say civic engagement is like a puzzle, and voting is one piece of the puzzle. Going to meetings is one piece of the puzzle. Emailing is one piece of the puzzle. Having conversations with your legislators or your elected officials. And so it's a continuum of things that we need to do. But I think if we impress upon more people, like, hey, you just can't vote and disappear. In order to get things done in the community, it has to be a sustained engagement. Yes, ma'am. Yes. In heels, might I say. Very impressive. Very impressive.
2 things. One, I forget the speaker, but whoever had the map up about, basically getting around the electoral college.
Yes.
How many states have voted to do that?
Yes.
And is this like, can we have 25 states in the district? Or do we have to have 26 states? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a.
And my second question is, just for all the hunters in the audience, I'm sure there's thousands of them. When is the Second Amendment tax holiday?
Yes. So Jackie will pull up the Second Amendment sales tax holiday, because I don't remember it from the slide, but I think it's like September. What was the date again, Jackie?
September 8th through December 31st.
September 8th through December 31st. You can go and purchase your ammo, your guns, your sights, all the things, and not have to pay tax. Now, as to your first question, which I'm trying to remember because I'm getting older, and I just forgot that quick.
Electoral
Oh
college.
yeah, it was about
How
the
many
electoral college.
states?
So 17 states have already opted in. There are 2 ways by which that can be adopted. The first would be we have a supermajority of all the states agree to enact that. Ultimately, there would be a push towards like a constitutional amendment. But the other way And this is tricky because it falls into a gray area. There's some legal questions as to whether or not they could do it. But the other way is that if enough states that represent at least 270 electoral votes, which is the number needed to win the presidency, opt in. So if you get enough states that equal that math, there's a legal thought that that could become binding. But there's some who say even with that, it would still require a 2/3 of the state. So that's going to ultimately become a fight if it gets to that, because of course it's easier to get the 270 electoral votes for the states than it is to get 2/3 of all the states to agree. So that's why there's like this big push. But yes, 17 states, and then like I said, if your state opted into this pact, you would not like your votes wouldn't go based on how your state voted. It would go based on how the country voted, and then you would award your electoral votes based on that. So presently, let's say Florida opted into this. Even if Florida voted for the Republican candidate as a state, right? Like within the state, the voters of Florida voted for the Republican candidate. If a Democratic candidate won the national vote, because of this pact, Florida would then award our electoral votes based on the nation's vote. So that's how that would play out. And again, of course, that is fair. Yes, ma'am. I think that'll be our last question, and we're gonna have to close out. Okay, two more. Yes.
This is not a question, but to go back to this young lady over here that was asking about what can she take back to her family and so on. Did you let everyone know where they can go and look up these different laws and so on, bills and so on? Because that is a very good start that you need to do to get educated for your family and so on.
Yes,
So,
ma'am. Thank you for that. So you can certainly visit the official sites for the Florida Senate and Florida House, floridasenate.gov, Florida House, it's actually myfloridahouse.gov. But we have a bunch of resources on our link tree. So if you scan, you can kind of poke around and see different things. We have an advocacy folder that has a PDF with all of the different laws that went into effect. I will say that WFSU, I think is the name of the publication, but they do a really good publication every year of every single bill, and they explain it in layman's terms. So it's not all the legalese and the political jargon. It's just basically, hey, this is what this bill does. And I want to say we have that linked in our advocacy folder. But yeah, certainly, yes, that's a great idea. Just getting a foundational understanding of what is and what isn't. Yes, we had a question in the back?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to know the people that work overseas that have to vote, is they gonna make it harder for them, for their votes to be counted since they're out of the country when it's time to vote?
Yeah, so presently, if you are an overseas voter, particularly military, you have an opportunity the ballot has an opportunity to be received and be counted by a certain time, even after the election, as long as it's postmarked by the appropriate time. We know that this administration continues to say, different things, and there was an executive order, and there is a push to get legislation on the books that all ballots must be received by election day. And so that would certainly be a departure from what we're accustomed to. But as of right now, there's nothing that has prevented, at least in my knowledge, if there's anybody who has anything otherwise, in my knowledge, there isn't anything that is presently on the books that would prevent those ballots from being counted.
Well, some of the people that came back from overseas, and I work on base, they were told they couldn't vote.
Wow. And so when that happens, we like to document that. I don't know if any of y'all know this. I don't know, but we like to document that, and so we can work with you to figure out what's going on with that. We have a team of attorneys. We're part of the national protection, voter protection effort throughout the state, and we have attorneys who have agreed to work with us pro bono to investigate and to help be your representative to get to the bottom of why you may be having an issue with your vote. And we just recently helped someone from the local community in Santa Rosa get to the bottom of that. They were basically informed after the election that their vote didn't count. And so just imagine how disappointing that was to have casted your vote only to find out later that it was not counted. And so we encourage, for those of you who live in counties that have a tracking system, if you vote by mail, track your ballot, make sure that it was counted. There's a way, it's called ballot tracks. It allows you to track the status of your vote by mail. But absent of that, even if you just pick up the phone and call, they can give you a status and if they received it or counted it. Thank you for that. All right, folks. Well, this has been really good. I know Jill is in here. She's looking at me like, all right, it's time to transition. But again, I sincerely thank you all so much for the opportunity. This has been great to be here in the Panhandle. We always enjoy coming up this way. Thank you again to our partners for making this possible. And we will be around. I'm driving back a little later, but I'm sticking around at least for an hour or so. If you have any questions, pull to the side. Happy to talk a little bit more after this. But thank you all.
We're going to get you to stay where you are. So please give Equal Ground, Genesis, and Jackie another round of applause. So as you all may very well know, this is our third year. We've rotated this. It started in Escambia County, and then last year we held it in Santa Rosa, and now we're in Okaloosa. We're going to start this process over, God willing, next year in 2026 as well. So we wanted to take this opportunity to sincerely thank Equal Ground for all that they've done for us. We've joined them here for the legislative session debrief, and we've traveled to Tallahassee. I'd recommend that each of you go to the Day at the Capitol. It's definitely a worthwhile event. So we have a small token of appreciation from the Northwest Florida Panhandle Coalition for Civic Engagement, Movement for Change, and Real Women Radio Foundation. And it is the Civic Impact Award, and it's presented to Genesis Robinson and Equal Ground in recognition of your unwavering commitment to civic engagement, voter education, and grassroots advocacy throughout Northwest Florida. Your work has uplifted communities, amplified underrepresented voices, and strengthened democratic participation across our region. Through strategic outreach, coalition building, and fearless dedication to equity, Equal Ground has become a beacon of progress and empowerment. We honor your leadership in advancing justice, fostering inclusive civic spaces, and ensuring that every voice counts. Your impact resonates far beyond the ballot box. It inspires a movement. With deepest gratitude and admiration, the Northwest Florida Panhandle Coalition for Civic Engagement, Movement for Change, and Real Women Radio. We thank you all for it.
So you might not know this, but every time we go to Tallahassee, Genesis surprises, usually Jerry McIntosh in memory of his late wife. And so we had to surprise you this time. And so we are presenting to you, as he said, the Civic Impact Award. It's presented to Equal Ground and Genesis Robinson for courageous leadership and unwavering commitment to truth, equity, and civic education. You have illuminated truth, empowered communities, and expanded civic space, ensuring every voice counts. Your impact reaches far beyond the ballot box and inspires a lasting movement. With gratitude from all of us. And we're always going to have something for Jackie. And welcome to the team, welcome to the family. And then we wanted to do something different, and we made this creative poster, and on the back everybody signed it, and then we have cards for you guys so that you will remember why you first started to come to the Northwest Florida Panhandle, because we had to ask them to come, but when we asked, they responded every time, and so we just truly want to say thank you.
I know y'all have heard from me a lot today, but I would be remiss if I did not say thank you. I really certainly appreciate this acknowledgement. We don't do it for the acknowledgements or the accolades, but it's certainly appreciative when we are recognized. And, you know, this is a labor of love to our community. I do this full time as a professional. Got my start working in the United States Congress, served as a legislative aide for almost 5 years. Before moving to the state, working in the state legislature. And so being here with the organization on the nonprofit side doing this work it's just a different type of impact and excitement every day that I wake up with. So I love it. Like Jackie said, it can be taxing. We've been on the road. We've hit 23 tour stops since the end of session. So I've been just crisscrossing the state. I drove up last night from Daytona Beach because somebody decided to cancel direct flights with Silver Airlines. So I didn't want to change planes, but certainly, all of the time, the miles, the effort, it's worth it, especially when we can continue to build and try to make sense of this crazy world that we're living in. So I thank you to our team, thank you to our partners, and thank you to each of you for the work that you do to help make Equal Ground what it is. We really appreciate it. Drop mic.
Okay, and so now we just want to kind of walk you through what's going to happen next. You are encouraged, to eat lunch because we have a hot catered surprise for you. And you are also encouraged to come back to the second session. It only will be about an hour, hour and a half, but we have some really strong presentations to bring us all together. So what they just gave us is kind of like your beat, and then you come back, eat your lunch, and then get your dessert because we have work to do together. So if you'll give us just a moment, I'm going to ask somebody who is a pastor, which would not be me, to come up and bless the food while we just finish setting it up, and you will be eating in the next 2 minutes or so. But I want to tell every single one of you how much we truly appreciate that you are here today. If you have to leave, we do have to-goes for you because we know some of you might have to go. But if you can stay, we truly, truly ask you to join us. So I don't know who is a pastor. Do I have a pastor in the house? Hearing none, then we will get... Hello, welcome. Thank you so much. If you could, always.
Let us pray. Eternal God, our Father, we thank you for your mercy, your grace, your love. We thank you for your kindness. We thank you for being our God. So God, we ask that you would bless this food, that you provided resources to purchase, and the hands that prepared it. Let it be nourishment to our bodies and our bodies to your service. We thank you for a glorious day. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, we'll forever praise you. Amen and amen.
So please, at this time, if you'll give us just a few minutes, we'll come back and we're going to ask you to walk through these doors. Food will be served, and then once lunch is over, say about 12:35, we'll reconvene back in the same place.